Okay, you're ready. You're on. This is our program chairman, Penny Ingram, will introduce the program for this evening. Thank you.
It really doesn't seem possible that have come to the end of the year. But most of you have been with us for the whole year, and we're very glad. And, you know, it's funny. A great many of us have been with the Historical Society now for so many years that I just can't imagine a year without it. So be sure and think about coming all summer long. Think, no, I'm going to be there in September. So how many are from Foxborough? We have quite a few who aren't from Foxborough. How many of you remember Jolly Cholly? You know, it's funny. I have 3 children who are now, the oldest one is 54, and they go on down from there. And that was really a highlight in their life, to go over to Jolly Cholly's and have some of their fried clams. Bob, you didn't mention fried clams in all that you told us about Jolly Cholly's. I'm going to read. As you know, our program is presented by Bob Lanford tonight. And Bob is one of our members, and Bob is also, you probably know, the president of North Attleboro Historical Society. But when Bob sent us a little bit about what he was going to talk about tonight, he says that the presentation starts with its first days serving, that Jolly Cholly's first days served soft serve ice cream, and then they continued on its heydays as an amusement park that attracted many visitors to North Attleboro for many summers. And it really was, back then, it wasn't a great big amusement park, but it was really a magical place for children. They really loved it. Say the 12-year-old, the 14-year-old. Perhaps they outgrew it by 7, 8 years old, but they really loved it at that time. So, okay, Bob, you're on.
Thank you, Penny.
Hey, look. That's wonderful.
So can I have a show of hands of who went there in their teen years? Now we got a couple. Yeah. Okay. Okay, who brought their kids to Jolly Cholly's? Okay, I know there's at least one person that worked there. Anybody else that worked there? Okay.
That's wonderful that somebody worked, that someone's here who worked there.
Well, I've given this presentation about 5 times now, and I usually do run to somebody that's either worked there or...
Really?
Yeah, so anyways. Jolly Cholly Funland was a creation of Charles Nassif and his wife. And this is Charles Nassif. He was a 1930 graduate of Central Falls High School, and he's graduating at the start of the Depression, and as soon as he graduated, he took the cheapest transportation to New York City, which was a boat from Fall River. And arriving in Fall River, he was, in New York City, he was lucky enough to land a job immediately at a Woolworths working at the luncheon counter. And so he spent 5 years in Harlem working at that luncheon counter, putting in 100-hour work weeks for $12 per week. And so he was used to a long work week. And from New York City, Charlie went into the carnival business, and he traveled up and down the East Coast at various amusement parks. Yeah, I'm fine. And what he found was that weather was one of his chief enemies in those days, but another of them was the type of people that came to these parks and the fights that tended to follow them. And During the time of the '38 hurricane, Charlie was the concessionaire at Rocky Point Park in Warwick, Rhode Island. And at Rocky Point Park, he had an airplane ride. And at '38 hurricane, it was at the end of the season, and pretty much everything had been packed away. But many of the concessionaires happened to be there that day and saw the tide rising up the cove, and it kept working its way up and taking down some of the buildings as it came up, and they all headed to the highest point in the park. And so we watched his rides floating down the river. And so a few days later, he did manage to salvage most of it. But he always remembered that weather was a key thing in the amusement business. This is Charlie's wife, Helen, and she also had an amusement park background. She was the first woman manager in the United States of an amusement park, and that was the White City Amusement Park in Worcester. Sometime in the 40s, Charlie got into the new fledgling business of serving soft serve ice cream. And by 1951, he owned and operated the Polar Dairy Bar in Onset, Mass. And in 1952, he was doing business as the Dairy Giant. And in that business, he was going up and down the East Coast, mostly in New England, setting up soft serve ice cream businesses throughout New England. And he owned the New England franchise for doing that. So these are some of the businesses that he set up. I'm not sure of their locations. These are all family photos from the Naisif family. So if you recognize any of these places, let me know, because I'm looking for that information. This is a Dairy Dream, and the Dairy Cream. Come on. Dairy Topper. The Dairy Maid.
That's in Raynham.
In Raynham? Okay.
On Route 44. Still there.
Okay. Still under that same name?
I believe so.
Okay.
It's just east of where Walmart is on 44.
Okay.
On the same side.
Thank you. And the Frost House. And this is his dairy bar that he opened up in North Attleboro in 1954. And when he opened up his business on Route 1, most of this area was swampland. And he bought up bits and pieces of land to build up enough area so that he could open up his business. And so most of the land was filled in, something you could do in those days, fill in swampland. You couldn't get away with that these days. And so this is what his business originally looked like. He could go there and get cones or sundaes, fraps. But it was strictly ice cream and those types of things. He hadn't added other dishes at this time. And it didn't have any indoor area, so it was only open during the summers. But you could get a sundae for between 20 and 45 cents. A banana split, 50 cents. Those were the days.
Banana split is probably $3.
And he also provided some picnic area so that if you wanted to spend a little time there, you could sit down with the kids and enjoy your ice cream. And the two gentlemen on the left were in the business with W.H. Riley and Sons, and he had bought up some of the land from them, and he also used their services to blacktop and pave the site. So he probably had some loans with them as well. And so here they are sampling some of his ice cream.
Is that Jolly on the?
Yes, there's Charlie Naisif on the right, and Warren Allen on the left. And in 1955, he negotiated a loan with the H.P. Hood & Sons company, from whom he was buying his mixture for his soft serve ice cream. And he used the money to expand the building. He added basically doubled the size of his building, adding an addition onto the right-hand side. And it was in that section that you could go in and get out of the weather. Here he is open during the winter. You can see the snow on the ground. And you could order at a little lunch counter there. But there's still no seats for you to sit down. It's just an area where you could get in out of the weather and give your order. So these are a few of the employees, probably in the early 60s. Here again, I don't know their names, so if you recognize somebody, let me know. I believe this is Charlie Nassif's son, Donald. He did tend to use most of his family in the business in some way or another. So even in the early 50s, he was getting a good crowd. And so now he's added fryer laters so he could add his clams and his french fries. And he also had hamburgers. But of course, ice cream was still the mainstay of the business. So here we're serving up some of that soft serve ice cream. And the prices were still cheap. Hamburgers for 30 cents. A steak sandwich for 50 cents. And your fried clams, a penny.
Yep.
You probably would have gone for the big order, right? $1.40.
Lobster with salad roll.
So business was doing really well, and so in October of 1956, Charlie started construction of an indoor dining room, which opened in 1957. So here's that indoor dining area. This is a little bit later picture from the early 70s. You may recognize this. And he also opened a separate building where you could buy your pizza and spaghetti dinners, or your Italian sandwiches. And so here's an overall view of the site, showing that separate building on the right, and the dining area that expanded the building on the left, and plenty of parking, but still no rides. So we dedicated his business to those who enjoyed eating out. But who didn't? Everybody did, right? And he also was doing enough business so that he talked the Coca-Cola company into funding the sign that he put out front. So the sign pulled all those people off from Route 1 into his parking lot. You notice that nothing else is built up yet. This is in the late 50s, and there's still really nothing else going on this section of Route 1 yet. I think there was, diagonally across at one time, there was Wally's ice cream, but I don't think he could compete. So here's a busy weekend afternoon. And in 1958, Charlie added his first amusements, and that was a miniature golf course in back of it. I guess before this, he did actually have a swing set and a teeter-totter and a few little things by the ice cream parlor, but here was something else that he could charge you a little extra for while you were there. Something you could do at night or during the day on weekends. And now you see there are a few other little businesses going up. Little donut shop down the street. And I did meet one person that said that he was 15 years old in 1965, and he worked all summer managing the golf course at 15 and put in lots of hours and earned $1,500 in one summer. So.
Very good.
And in 1959, we see the beginnings of the Funland. And he, remembering all the fights that he saw at Rocky Point and other amusement parks that he worked at, he wanted an amusement park that was scaled down so that he would attract people that were 12 or under, is pretty much what he was shooting for. So some of his first rides included the carousel at the far left. Notice that it has a canvas top. That would change later. He also had the little boat rides. That's next to the carousel. And the whip, a miniature version of the whip on the right. And the helicopter ride. He also had a miniature Ferris wheel. And what was originally called the Skyfighter ride and was later called the Satellite ride. And in the beginnings of the amusement park, Charlie even put his mother to work. And this is his mother selling tickets. And all rides were 10 cents, or you could get 7 rides for 65 cents. So Jolly Cholly Funland incorporated on May 28th, 1959, and in the first 2 days of business, which were Saturday and Sunday, the Funland took in just under $1,000 from the rides. And in his first month of business, the Funland took in just under $4,000 from the rides. But meanwhile, the Dairy and Snack Shack had taken in almost $20,000, and the pizza business took in an additional $15,000. So you can still see that the food business was bringing in the most money and was still the biggest part of his business. But for the 1960 season, Charlie added what I term the world's smallest roller coaster. The photographer had to be lying on his back to take this picture because the ride really wasn't much over the top of my head. And he also employed Salty Brian to do a lot of his advertising for him. He did a lot of radio announcements for him. One of my friends said that she could still remember the jingle that went along with it. I can't remember. But so here's Charlie Naismith on the right and Salty Brian sitting next to him. And here's Salty Brian again on the carousel handing out probably free passes to rides.
Is he still living?
Yes, he's still around, still on the radio, still on TV. Yeah. And Charlie even added Salty Brian's picture to the top of the pizza building, so just over the clown's shoulder to the right. Yeah, and this is Benny, the Jolly Cholly talking bunny. I'm not sure if he was just a Easter time attraction. I know they did have Easter egg hunts there at one time. But probably the best advertising came from Charlie's good works, especially with children of the community. He devoted a good part of his time and a substantial amount of money that he gave to charity works, mainly associated with children. Youngsters from the Ladd School in Rhode Island and the Rentham State School and the Attleboro area and Blackstone Valley Retarded Children's Associations were bused at regular periods to the rides. He also gave spaghetti for spaghetti suppers for church dinners. I met one person that said you would just have to call Charlie up and say, we're having a spaghetti dinner, and Charlie would show up with all the fixings. Already hot, the church only had to serve it, they didn't even have to cook it. And at his church in Cumberland, when they put an addition on the building, he donated the whole kitchen, all stainless steel. He also ran clam bakes for his church. So he also gave to the Boy Scouts, and he was probably best known in the area for his relationship with the North Attleboro Scholarship Fund. He donated ride tickets to anybody that donated to the scholarship fund. And he also gave free rides to kids that got A's on their report card. Okay, how many people got A's and got free rides? Oh, just one person? Oh, two? Okay, okay. So he got a lot of thank you notes as well from people that got free rides, and also people that he met that he felt maybe couldn't afford a nice day out, and so he would just give them a day.
Yeah.
In 1960, he started construction of the train ride, and here's the train just having been delivered to the site, still on the pallet. And the train went roughly a mile around the whole park. And that's Mr. Hallam. He was usually the engineer for the train ride. And at the same time, he added a roadway ride. Little kiddie cars on a track so that they didn't get lost. And that's the little train station, basically just a covered area where you would wait for the train ride. And the train ride cost him $28,000. Just the railroad station alone cost him $3,000. I'm not just sure when he bought the clown sign, but surely by 1960. And sometime in the early 60s, he also replaced that cloth top on the carousel with a steel structure, which would keep you out of the weather better and also protect the rides. And at the same time, he added a snack shack to the Funland area so that you didn't have to leave the park in order to get your ice cream. You could stay right within the park. And so here's the satellite ride or Skyfighter ride. And that's Route 1 with a little trailer park across the street or trailer sales area. And that's that little miniature whip, and the Ferris wheel and back. And here's that little boat ride. I don't think that's James Dean on the right, but it could be. And in the foreground of this picture is that little snack shack I was telling you about, so you could go there and get some popcorn or ice cream or sandwiches. In the back is the miniature roller coaster. On the left-hand side is the roadway ride. In the far rear, you see the first ride for the teenage set. This was the mid-60s, and at this time, Route 95 was taking away some of his business. He was no longer getting the amount of traffic that he was used to going up and down Route 1. Some of it had been diverted to Route 95. And so he started to add other things to attract other people to his amusement park. I believe this ride was bought used from a World's Fair that was held on the West Coast. And this is the original name. It was called the Weissatron, but it was quickly renamed the Himalaya ride. It's probably how most of us remember it. Also got a new paint job. So now that he was attracting the teenage set, they found other reasons to come. Just behind the Funland, they had dances at the American Legion. Just down the street, you had Bobby's Rollaway. And so after a night of Bobby's Rollaway, many of the kids would come up to Jolly Cholly's and park in his parking lot, mainly just to be seen or see who's there, not necessarily to spend any money. Maybe they'd buy some French fries or some clam strips or whatever. But it was a good location, and everybody showed up. But it wasn't long before he started having troubles. Seemed like every Saturday night, a bunch of kids from Central Falls would come up, and fights would break out over the ladies from the local area, probably. There were a number of razor blade fights. So the police started patrolling the parking lots. My father tells me one story of a local policeman who was patrolling the back parking lots and found his daughter in the back seat with some rats. Does anybody recognize their car in any of these pictures? Still attracting a lot of people, and I know that lots of time the parking lot would get so full that the overflow would go across the street into the Sandy's parking lot. And so now we see that more businesses are coming to the area. Cold Stone Restaurant was basically built to take up some of the overflow from Jolly Cholly's. They had that little Sputnik sign in their parking lot. Remember that? And then after Sandy's, King's department store moved in there, and they had that sign that said King's, and it would light up K-I-N-G.
Yeah, I don't remember.
You don't remember that?
It's fun. What year would that have been, the King?
King's was probably in the early 70s.
Early 70s.
Well, they have onion rings now.
Yep, he kept expanding his menu. As other businesses did develop on Route 1, one of the businesses that moved in was Burger Chef. And so that was the start of fast food, and they were taking away some of his business, and so they were selling 19-cent hamburgers. He was selling 30-cent hamburgers, but it didn't take him long, so he started advertising 19-cent hamburgers. So he tried to hold on to his business as best he could.
What year is that automobile there?
Let's see. Well, the Carming gear is probably from the mid-60s. Yeah, a little Corvair next to it, and a Chevrolet next to that. Probably.
It's a common year on the left. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
right.
A big sign advertising the pizza.
Pizza, yeah. Now, Penny's favorite food was the clam strips. Does anybody else have a favorite food that they remember from Jolly Cholly's?
I think that was my father's.
Oh, your father's favorite, huh? Now, there's looks like a 55 Chevy.
Yeah, that's a 55 Chevy.
George, what did you say you were driving at this time?
I forgot.
Did you have your convertible then, or?
I had a 60 Dodge Polara convertible.
Now, did you spend any money when you came here, or did you just park in the parking lot?
Used the parking lot.
But not everything was sunny in Charlie Nace's world. Along with the teenagers, trouble soon followed, I was saying, with the gangs from Rhode Island coming in. But he had other troubles too. There was more than one attempt to try to rob him. Charlie was a gun owner, and he knew how to use one, and he always carried a Derringer in his boot. So nobody ever made away with any money. He chased more than one of them away himself. Another thing was the weather. Route 1 always flooded at least a couple of times every year. And in the late 60s, the town decided they were going to solve this problem once and for all. Like I said, this had been mostly swampland, and it was all filled and black-topped over, so it really had no place to drain to. So the town was looking to put a new drainage system in this area, but they didn't really want to spend the money. So they were looking for some state funds, and the only way they could get state funds was to improve the roadway as well. So they made a proposal to the state that they were going to put a divider all the way down Route 1, something that the state's still talking about doing. But basically all the business owners in the area said, well, that will just kill our business. We're already having problems with 95 and everything going by. And you put a dividing strip down the center, and that'll really do bad things to us. So they did manage to fight that off, and the town found another way to fund the project. And in order to attract more business on the weekends, Charlie started holding a flea market in the rear parking lot on Saturdays and Sundays starting in 1965. And when he first opened the flea market, it was only 50 cents to set up there, so it was very cheap. And he added this little building at the end of the pizza building where you could go and get your ice cream. If you were just walking in the flea market area, you didn't have to travel too far. You could just go right there, and he'd just open up that one little section early in the morning on the weekends for people to get coffee or whatever. And another thing that he added in the late 70s, or excuse me, in the late 60s, early 70s, was he added alcohol to his menu. So he was struggling to keep the business going, I think, at this point, trying to attract more people to his, for his dinners. And a story in the February 2nd, 1972 issue of the Newsleader, which was the local weekly newspaper at the time, reported that Charles Nassif, at the age of 59, was being prepared to sell Jolly Cholly's dining and amusement complex to Jocko Corps. And he planned to give up his normal workday, which extended from 8 one morning until 2 a.m. the next morning. So he was still working at least 100-hour work weeks. Charlie stated that he was proud that there had never been a serious accident at his amusement park, which he had scaled down to accommodate the younger children. The new owners planned to retain the family atmosphere, at least that's what they said originally. And they also planned to expand both the amusement park and the dining area. And this is the working partner. There was, I think, 3 or 4 partners in the new business. This is Mark Scala. At this time, when he came to Jolly Cholly's, he had just come from Rocky Point, where he was doing the shore dinners there. Before that, he had also run a restaurant up at Expo 67 up in Montreal. And before that, he had come to Canada to open up, let's see, I think it was judo that he was into. He was like a French judo champion or something, and so he came to Canada to open up some judo studios, teach children how to do judo. And quoting from a May 18th, 1974 trade journal, since Mark Scala and partners Pat Ruggieri and Bill Veratis took over the 18-acre Jolly Cholly Funland in 1972, a $2.50 pay one price pass for the Funland was available, and they were also available for $1.50 with a coupon that was available widely. But if you didn't find one of those passes, the rides were still 10 cents, although some of the rides used up to 8 tickets for a ride, so they were really 80 cents for a single ride. So these are some pictures from the early to mid 70s of what was going on there in the food area. Maybe somebody recognizes some of these people. Were you still going there, Penny, in the 70s?
I haven't been going for a long time, not to the 70s. When I went really was when my kids were little, you know.
Under the new management, the facility was expanded to include a 180 seat main dining area. And they had a 320 seat chowder hall in the summer. So they filled in the area between the 2 buildings. Meanwhile, the flea market was continuing on the weekends to attract more trade to the business. And it was so busy that they required 3 policemen to handle the traffic on the weekends. And up to 200 employees were needed while the Funland was open from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And this is from a pamphlet that the new partners put out. And instead of seeing 95 as taking away their business, they were trying to promote it as a good way to get to their amusement park, so that they would attract people from a wider location. They also added a few new rides. Here we have the bumper cars that they added. And this is one of the last rides that was added. I don't think it ran more than a few times. It was a very complicated mechanism. Each car rotated, and those two ends went around this way, and it also revolved around this way. So it was very complex, and I think it only ran a few days and then never really ran again.
They sold it to NASA, didn't they?
Oh, it could be, I don't know. But I'm sure it's probably one that they bought used, and they did find that it was very expensive to keep up the rides that were there. They had been there since about 1960, so they were already starting to show their age. And they also found buying new rides, even used rides, was very expensive. Another couple of rides that they added, the Holiday Express, and in the far distance was a paratrooper ride. In the August 12, 1979 edition of the Providence Sunday Journal, in the Action Line section, it included a complaint from a family from Cranston which complained that the Land of Fantasy, as it was now known, the family found corrosion on safety bars and some of the seat belts were broken. And so the Providence Journal did a little research, and in their answer, they said that they went to the town's building inspector, and he found only one safety violation inside the park, and that was an awning that was overhanging one of the rides and it had collected 75 gallons of water. And he also notified the park management that there were several health violations in the parking lot, including uncollected debris and abandoned junk cars. And the wiring inspector found that there were no electrical violations. In fact, he noted that the park had improved considerably since the previous March when he was there, and had found serious electrical violations on 14 of the 16 rides that they had at the time. So he stated that corroded safety bars didn't mean that the rides were unsafe, and he didn't find any broken seat belts. Meanwhile, an insurance company inspection found that 2 of the rides were unsatisfactory, that being the Bubble Bounce and the Bavarian Funhouse slide, and so both of those were taken out of service. The North Attleboro Selectmen, the previous May, had licensed a Robert Nutting as general manager of the Land of Fantasy to operate 16 rides. And the Funhouse slide and the Bubble Bounce were removed, but meanwhile they added the Paratrooper and another ride to take their place. The owners stated that they had found the park in terrible condition when they bought it in February of 1978, and they told the Providence Journal that they had worked very hard to improve the conditions. In fact, Nicholas Santamaria, who said that he was the owner of the Land of Fantasy, said that he had already invested $300,000 to clean up the park and expected to spend up to another $1 million. And the Journal tried to delve into a little bit of the ownership of the park, and they kept coming up with different names, and it seemed like, you know, that maybe there was some money laundering going on or something here. So in 1981, workers are seen here dismantling the sign to the Funland section, and the amusement park, the rides were sold off, and amusement park saw its last days as a successful, actually unsuccessful in the late 70s and early 80s business. And so it was closed down, and all that remains are the memories of people like you in the audience, and a few signs that are in the collection of the Falls Fire Barn in North Attleboro, where they still have a sign that says clams, so Penny, you can go see your sign, and fraps. So I'll put the lights up. And does anybody have anything they want to add to?
I'd like to ask you, how did you come up with the name of Jolly Cholly? What was that a play on?
Well, his name was Charles, so
Okay.
it was, and there was a, he was also into baseball. He did have a number of Little League teams that he sponsored, and there was a gentleman who had the nickname Jolly Cholly, who was a professional baseball player
Okay.
in the, I don't know, 40s and 50s. So whether that played into it at all, I'm not sure.
Charlie Grimm, manager of the
Right.
Chicago Cubs.
Right, he had been a player at one time and then later a manager. So I don't know if that had anything to influence it or
When
not.
did he die, the original owner?
I think he died in the late 70s. His wife died about 2 years ago. So. And most of these photographs did come from the family. In fact, I have his original ledgers where he kept track of daily business, including the weather every day. And within months of his opening up just the ice cream parlor, Hurricane Carol came through and put him out of business for a couple of days. He was always fighting the weather, it seemed. Any other comments?
Who's the property now?
It was, well, right now it's in courts, I think, at least the last thing I heard. Somebody bought most of the property and added some apartment buildings to the rear of the property, and probably at one time planned on putting retail business out front. Person that bought the property married again late in life, and after he passed away, there was a fight between the second wife and the children from the first marriage, and so it's all held up in courts, as far as I know. The town did make them clean up the site a couple of times, and they did board up all the buildings. But
How many acres comprised of the amusement park area,
I-
the parking lot and the restaurant?
yeah, it was about 18 acres. Another thing that happened in Jolly Cholly, every year the gypsies would come through this area. And he would allow them to set up their camp in the rear parking lot. So that was another thing. I don't really remember that, but that was one story that was told to me.
Well, Bob, thank you very much for taking us back.
I did bring my photographs with me so that if you want to really look for your car, the still photographs are of it. I also brought a little watercolor that was done probably in the early 60s. And there are some refrigerator magnets over there of Jolly Cholly's if anybody's interested in those as well.
Thank you very much. You know, I think it would be nice if one of the memories that we have is all of the good things that Mr. Nassif did when he was in his heyday. You know, I know that he was noted for being a really nice guy to everyone who needed it. So maybe we can not only think of the fun times with Jolly Cholly, but remember him nicely too. Thank you. I remember, you know, when it was real, just the way I remember it. I didn't know that girl, but I must have gone home another way.